Hey everyone, welcome to the Tech Town Square. What's happening, world? It's the day before Christmas. Eddie, what's happening?
Yeah, it's the day before Christmas, so we decided to have a cheers. So, James, to
Cheers,
you, my
buddy.
friend. There you
Cheers.
go.
There we
Right,
go.
cheers. What have
To
you
the,
got in there?
I've got a Macallan 15. What about yourself?
Beautiful. I've got a Dalmore 10 year. Yeah, it's Christmas. I should break out the good stuff. The only good one I've got upstairs right now is a 15-year Glenfiddich. But I've been looking for a good occasion, and in 2020 there hasn't been one. But there could very well be today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Tech Town Square, and so we have a focus on tech, but it's really the town square part, right? It's conversation, it's open dialogue, opinions, hashing out opinions, and may the best ideas win. Now, I'm in technology, James is technology, but I actually need you or somebody to explain some technology to me. Because had it not been for the fact that we were all observant on this stimulus plan that Congress tried to push through today, I think it was today.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. We wouldn't have paid attention to all of the fine details. But as it happens, because many people are looking for $600 and unfortunately are destitute out there, everyone went combing through this document to look for where is the US spending money. So the first major alarm that I have is the US Constitution, founding an entire country, is 5 pages long. This bill that Congress tried to put through is 5,500 pages long for one stimulus plan that should be giving American citizens $600 check. But the help that I need on the technology side, oddly enough, is something else I saw in the stimulus plan. And it is, and I'm reading, and I'll read it twice, probably 3 times, because you won't believe me. Walking lizards on a treadmill. $1,557,083. I'm going to say it again because you're probably going, what did he say? Walking lizards on a treadmill. $1,500,557.83. Wow. What are we doing with that technology? I'm not sure.
It's helping us deal with aliens. All right, walking lizards on treadmills is essentially trying. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to see if lizards walked on treadmill, could that replace fossil fuels and save the world? And then we can pass the Green New Deal at $1 quadrillion and officially bankrupt this country.
Man, funds for the boating infrastructure grant program, 13 million, because people who have boats need stimulus. It goes on and on. Here's another one. I just want to bring up I'm having fun with this because the only thing you can do tragically in a tragedy is either laugh or cry. It's Christmas. I'm choosing to laugh, right?
Well, I mean, this was a Christmas bill for everyone but the American public.
Yeah, well, there was money and the millions for racehorse owners. I'm serious about this. Racehorse owners. You need some money, right? So listen to this. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. Funds classes for Kenyan artists and performers. So Kenya, right? 150,000. Okay.
Yeah, that's not too bad though. That's not too bad. That's by the State Department. That's in an effort to increase art out of Kenya. And support artists. 150 grand, man. You could get that. They can raise that money, and they could probably raise more than that for Kenyan artists.
Not during COVID, though, right? In COVID, it's time to tighten in the belt. I mean, it's like, I'm sorry to our international
Listen, there's something worse on there. All right, look at line number 1. That's, I think, what is that? $8,620,000,000 on Afghanistan on counter narcotics efforts. Are you kidding me, man? I was deployed. I know people that were deployed. We drove by the poppy seed fields and did nothing when we could have burnt that shit down. We didn't need billions. All we needed was a really cool flamethrower from Elon Musk.
And now we're spending 8.6 billion. Here's another one. And look, I mean, this is I suppose, a good cause. Help deal with truant Filipino youth. 37,500,000.
What are they giving them?
Well, what are they giving them? I don't know. Monitoring Zimbabwe elections, 10 million.
How about we monitor our own elections?
Right. Help disconnected Tunisian youth not feel like a problem. 48 million. I forget, it's not on this list in front of me, but we're also
Did you see this one for $2 million? I'm sorry, this is too funny.
Go on.
Seeks to start a venture capital fund for bad investments. $2 million.
What? What is it? That doesn't even make sense. Is that to cover their losses? It doesn't make sense, does it? There's also, and I forget, it's not in front of me, millions for attempting to, not overthrow is the word they use, the Venezuelan government. And it's just like, okay, I would agree the Venezuelan government needs to go, but not during COVID. During COVID, we've got people, Americans, who've paid into the tax system for years. They should be getting some of their money back. So this is what's particularly disturbing. Sorry, man, are they having to say, is that this is not the government's money. People seem to think it is. It's not. It's our money, right?
So you're bringing up a really good point. So I want to point something out to you. You're talking about foreign development, foreign aid, right? And foreign aid has some aspects to it that we do that are predominantly philanthropic in nature, right? Like the Kenya thing and then some other stuff. In the Philippines, truant kids in the Philippines. How about we deal with the hungry kids in America? Okay. The waste of 2020, though, in healthcare this year is unbelievable. So are you ready? Now I'm going to try to go these and not laugh. Okay. But here we go. They did a study for $1,327,781.72. And they studied if you'll eat ground up bugs. So if they grind up bugs in a blender, and that was 1.4 million. By the way, folks, that's Fauci's NIH. I continue. They spent $36,831,620 with the question of why does stress make your hair turn gray? That's really important to spend $37 million on that. They spent $1,471,617 trying to get Eastern Mediterranean youth to stop smoking hookahs.
What's a hookah?
A shisha. Those like water pipes?
Oh, yeah, with the pipe. Really, that's so important. That's helpful.
They spent nearly $7 million, just shy of $7 million, to use cancer research money to create a smart toilet.
Okay, it's the Tech Town Square. So we're on
your poop today. Your poop today is indicating that you have high glycemic. Please drink more water. They spent, let's see, $3.5 million, just shy of $3.5 million, sending messages to moms to stop their teenage girls from indoor tanning. Man. They spent $31,522,224 on an allegedly faked study linking e-cigarettes to heart attacks. They spent over $3 million interviewing San Franciscoans about their edible cannabis use.
I don't know. Just ask them.
They spent $2 million to see if hot tubbing can lower stress. That is, folks, this is all real here.
Yeah, healthcare.
Healthcare. They spent $57 million on appropriated to the urban Indian health programs. Okay. They spend $1 million to help people get over their fears of going to the dentist. But they spent more money on the prevalence of party drug use at New York City clubs and raves.
Yeah, I bet.
I want to be the staffer that got that. They're like, what are you doing? I got the tough job, man. What's your tough job? I got to go hang out in New York clubs and raves and study the prevalent drug use there. And I pop some ecstasy pills. I may do some shrooms. But that's just part of what I do.
Just ask the Rolling Stones. That's all you got to do. Those guys have been drugged up for like 50 years. You don't have to study anybody else.
$3.5 billion on years of delinquent, undelivered orders. That's from the VA.
Delinquent, undelivered what?
orders.
What does that mean? Your guess is as good as mine. Okay.
My guess is as good as yours on that one. By the way, here's some miscellaneous stuff. They rebuilt a taxiway for airplanes on Nantucket Island for $20 million. They bought COVID test tubes but received unusable soda bottles for $10 million.
What? They bought test tubes but received soda bottles.
Yeah, unusable soda bottles.
You know, this is why I keep going, oh, I'm a libertarian, because you don't spend somebody else's money in the same way you spend your money, right? If I was buying test tubes, I'd get test tubes. But if I was buying it with somebody else's money, you're not quite as careful as if you're buying it with your own money. Right?
So they sprayed alcoholic rats with bobcat urine.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
For $4.5 million.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. But anyway, I'm sure there's a good reason. And, you know, this is what's interesting. I think good reason. This is what's interesting. If it wasn't a pandemic year, you know, somebody could come on here and say, actually, you know what, spraying bobcat urine on rats makes the rats do something. We have less disease in New York City. I don't know. I mean, there must be some semblance of logic in this. Some are completely benign and stupid. Obviously.
Yeah, $33 million for economic support fund to be made available for the democracy programs of Venezuela.
That's the one, yeah, and it's like, okay, you know, people could come onto this, and I would love them to. I'd love to comment, or them to come on as a guest and say, actually, I'm going to defend my program, right? My bobcat urine spraying rodent program, and it's like, okay, you certainly could do that. My point is, not this year, not 2020, not when we've got citizens who have been paying tens of thousands every year into a tax base. That's what this is for right now, when the government has forced them out of their jobs. The government therefore needs to give them the rebate on the taxes they've been paying all these years. It's not their fault that they're out of their jobs, right? When the government locks everything down and closes it down. That's the time, unfortunately, for our friends overseas, where we clamp down on their programs. And actually, like him or not, there was an old tweet by Trump in 2014, which said something like this. I was trying to look for it earlier, so I balls it up a little bit, but it said something like, I hope we don't find life on another planet, because if we do, the US will send them money. It's like, yeah, that was really ringing true 6 years later.
You know, I mean, so the Technology Town Square piece of studying lizards on treadmills is extremely fascinating for one James Azar.
All right.
Because I want to be in the New Mexico or Oklahoma or Arizona research facility that did that. And I wonder, did they custom make treadmills for the lizards? Meaning, did they make like lizard-sized treadmills?
Right.
Or did they use actual treadmills for the lizards? Like, can I get more information on that?
Right. So that's the point. When you're spending 1.5 mil, you would think so. But again, it's not their money. And so, you know, Buddy next door, who's maybe, you know, got a son who needs to tinker around with a treadmill. Yeah, let's make a lizard treadmill. The problem is just gigantic when you see spending on this kind of scale. But I also think it's immoral, because I read this, I don't know if it's fact check true, that for the $600 that the American citizens will get, it will cost $2,700 to administrate it. Now, I understand there's administration costs in passing out money. I worked in not-for-profit for many years, but that much, it goes to show you that if you try to stimulate the US citizenry, there are so many hands grabbing that money along the way, $2,700, and you end up with $600 to the American citizen. Like, where's all the rest of that money going?
Well,
and it's immoral, man. It's immoral. And then to roll out this plan, 5,500 pages, and give Congress, 8 hours, wasn't it?
2 hours. They dropped it at 2:30. They rolled in the plan at 2:30, and then they said we're going to vote on it within 2 to 3 hours. and they did the call to vote, I think, around like 5 or 6 o'clock, and then it passed both chambers.
It's intentional. They want to roll all this garbage
but
out.
That's so let's today, folks, we're not going to talk so much about technology for a moment.
I guess not. It's really
let's shift to something that impacts all of us, which is reckless government spending by both Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, McCarthy. These guys should be ashamed of themselves for bringing something like this to the American people and thinking we're dumb enough. We're on to these politicians. We are on you. We don't trust you. We don't like you. We're gonna vote you out. Count your days. You are done. You are done. If Trump has empowered the people to care about the people, and the establishment and the swamp essentially are on the defensive, and when you're playing offense, you're bound to win. So just so you know, Alex Jones, Steve Bannon, Antifa, BLM have called for 10 million people to be in DC on January 6th for the certification of this election. For the first time in a very long time, the conservative right and the far left have one common goal. And that common goal is, Antifa may want to be anti-fascist, but they're against the establishment of the Democratic Party. The Trumpism movement in the conservative party, right? So that Trump movement now is looking at these conservative politicians, congressmen and senators that they're voting for, that say, I'm going to support President Trump on their campaign to get his endorsement, to get his voters to vote for him, and then don't do anything about it. And Trump has changed that. And we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. Now, the mainstream media may not want to have this discussion. The mainstream media may want to hide it, but in Georgia today, there was a hearing by the state representatives to decertify the election results in Georgia. In Pennsylvania today, President Trump hosted state representatives and state senators from the state for a luncheon at the White House. There are things happening. There's already been, I think, 80 or 90 congressmen and women who've said they will be objecting to the certification of the election results, which forces a 2-hour debate on the floor per objection.
So what does that actually mean, though, James? Because as you know,
so does Trump have a chance to win? So let me give you the basic, and then we'll go into the detail. Does Trump?
Can I ask you a quick question, though. We're talking about, I think it was December 15th. The Electoral College had to ratify, or December 12th.
14th, December 14th.
What happened on the 14th?
So the Electoral College ratified Joe Biden with 306 Electoral College votes and Donald J. Trump with 233 Electoral College votes.
Okay.
So now, the fact that the Electoral College ratified it means something. However, on January 6th, there's a joint session of Congress and Senate that's actually run by Mike Pence.
Okay.
And that's where they open the Electoral College votes, and they submit them to be certified by the U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate. In order to object, you need to have one congressman and one senator.
And this is what normally happens on January 6th, correct?
Correct. 2 weeks before inauguration, every time the Senate and Congress do a joint session, and they vote on certifying the election.
Okay.
The vice president is the one that oversees it. He gets all 50 envelopes. In this year, in January 6, 2021, Mike Pence will have 57 envelopes. He'll have 57 envelopes because 7 states have sent dual electors, meaning they've sent Democratic electors and they've sent Republican electors to the House. And that means that there's a process in place, and based on the Constitution, the people who get to select the electors is the state representatives, not the governor, not the Secretary of State.
Okay.
But in order for that to be certified, it's got to be signed by the governor, meaning the state representatives select their electors to vote for Joseph R. Biden Jr., and then it's signed by the state representatives, and then it's signed by the governor, and it's certified, and it's delivered to Washington, D.C. 7 states have 2 envelopes. One for Trump, one for Biden.
And that's never happened before, is that
It's
correct?
happened before. It's been done before it actually happened. We talked about it, I think, last week when I was mentioning Nixon and Kennedy, and Nixon was running against Kennedy, and Hawaii sent dual electorals, and Nixon ended up calling against himself.
What? Okay, all right. Let's move on with this one. Yeah, okay.
I know that's confusing, but it's really not. So the vice president runs this joint session.
Yeah.
When there's dual electorates, the vice president can choose to select one or the other, or he can choose to select none. If he says we've got 7 states in disputes, they're not adjudicated, then that goes to a lawsuit.
But I thought you just said he could just pick one, so obviously he would pick Republican.
Well, if he did that, though, it would probably create a strong upheaval.
But
right? So people would go out to the streets. It would make it illegitimate, right? The right thing for Pence to do is to be like, Pennsylvania has dual electors. The state representatives, as per the Constitution, awarded their electors to Donald J. Trump, the governor to Joseph R. Pence. They're in dispute based on election fraud, because in the 2 hour of debate, they can bring anyone they want to testify in front of the Senate and Congress. And then after that, then they vote. And because the Democrats have, I think, 4 or 5 more seats in Congress, they're going to win every time, right? So the only way to do that is to essentially say, it's in dispute. We're not going to object. We're going to send it to get, like, the states have got to come back with their own dispute, and then it goes to the Supreme Court.
Okay. But the Supreme Court backed out previously for good reason, because they said that the states should decide. So what's the difference?
So what would happen here is, because this is a constitutional matter. So the Constitution states that the governors don't have a right to send the electorates. The state representatives do. Most state houses in the disputed places go back into session January 3rd. So they could very well, on January 3rd and January 4th, do an entire recall on the election, decertify it in the House, and reassign those electors. Now, that's a very, very slim. That's probably not going to happen. But what will happen is, on January 6th, every time there's a dispute of a state, so you've got 7 states that are in dispute, that's 14 hours of debate. Okay? Minimum. That's 14 hours of debate. Maximum plus the story. You're talking that this won't be certified on January 6th.
Okay.
It's probably going to go into January 7th or 8th. Then at that point, the vice president, from my understanding, and I could be wrong here, at that point, then the vice president could, theoretically speaking, throw out both states and send it to a House vote, meaning every state delegation gets to give its vote. And I think that's the Trump campaign plan. They know they're not going to win by objecting. They want people to object so that the evidence can be presented to the American people when they force a House vote.
The evidence now, because I've got a bit of a beef actually with the Republican Party on this, because it's like, okay, we've had a couple of prosecutions, a couple of dudes in California, like 8,000 votes for Biden, whatever. We got those guys locked up now. That's fine. A couple of other areas. Show me the evidence of the mass fraud. Why can't they just present that to the American people now? Why do they have to go through this ridiculous process to?
So part of the idea of mass fraud is it takes a really long time to get to the place where you have mass fraud, right? It's not easy to prove mass fraud in a short period of time. Now, what we do know is that in 4 out of the 5 contested states, there's enough doubt to overturn the election. So in Georgia, the lawsuit that's currently being taken up to court shows over 100,000 votes cast for Biden that are illegal votes, meaning dead people, illegal aliens, people who don't live in the state of Georgia, etc.
Double votes.
If the court upholds those 100,000 votes, then Georgia would decertify, and their electorates would go to Trump. That wouldn't give enough Trump to win. Right? That would take Biden down to 290, put Trump around 247. So Trump needs 2 more states. He definitely needs Pennsylvania. He definitely either needs Wisconsin, Michigan, or Nevada. Or Arizona.
Yeah.
Right? So he definitely needs 2 more after Pennsylvania, or 1 more after Pennsylvania. He needs 3 out of 5. Now, 7 states have sent double electorates. New Mexico sent electorates for Trump as well, and Nevada did the same. Right? So,
but on your point of proving mass fraud over time, now digitally with the Dominion voting machines and the SolarWinds hacks, now we're getting into the tech, ladies and gentlemen, and the SolarWinds hack, which has revealed that Dominion was using SolarWinds and therefore the back door was active in the voting machines that we used. That is my understanding of it. I think that's accurate.
So what SolarWinds does, and what SolarWinds was... So Dominion has said that they use SolarWinds in their corporate offices and not on their machines, and not on the voting machines. I am going to believe them there.
But is that an important separation?
It is. Because if it's being used in your corporate network, let's say within your local offices, and it's not being... Because you got to remember, the machines run a software, but every... Dominion is kind of like a hardware company. Now they're predominantly hardware. They do a little bit of software, but they allow you to load any software you want. I voted yesterday here for the Georgia runoff race, and I used a Dominion machine again.
Okay.
Right? So, but I took a picture of my votes.
God, yeah.
Right? But that doesn't change. Like, look, there's been a bunch of stuff that's been said about Dominion, and none of it has happened. There's been no substantiating evidence beyond some connections here or there that make it seem shady. But we have to be realists, and we'd love it if Dominion came out and they were like the ultimate evil that would like play right into everyone's fantasy. But there's no proof. So at what point? So at what point do we go, okay, maybe it doesn't look right. It looks a little bit shady, but I've got no proof to say otherwise. So if I keep hammering that point, you lose credibility. And so at some point we just have to say, like, you know, Sidney Powell came out and said, we're going to release the cracking. And her cracking had just a bunch of conspiracy stuff and a few affidavits, but no physical or software proof. Now, the study out of Michigan, the forensic audit out of Michigan, that had some proof. That had a forensic analysis of the code that showed that votes were flipped from Trump to Biden.
On the machines?
On the machines. That is now that report, which got dismissed by mainstream media because they said the guy who wrote it is a Trumper. And I'm like, yeah, but the guy who wrote it is a former NSA guy, a highly respected cybersecurity guy, runs a company that's used by some of the Fortune 100s for their forensic work. This guy's testified in some really big cases. He's been in charge of some really serious investigations. That's why they hired him to do the job.
Right. The Republicans hired him, this guy?
He was hired by the county and the Republican Party to audit the Dominion machines.
So fair enough that he'd be a Trumper, and slightly acceptable that would be an accusation against him, right? I mean, come on. If it was the other way around, we'd be saying the same thing, kind of thing. So
right.
But so then again, it's like, show me the evidence in a manner upon which it is understandable for the average American.
Correct.
Right. That's what they've got to do, because if they don't do that, regardless of who wins, 70 to 80 million people are going to say that's an illegitimate president. For the
well,
next
50% of the population don't believe that Joe Biden's a legitimate president.
Right. So this is what I'm saying, right? So we have to have proof, because we have to settle this thing.
So I think the problem we have right now is we're using technology in government. We know that technology is adamantly vulnerable to glitches and things that happen that, are just, you and I as technologists know, you're going to have to reset your router every once in a while. You're going to have to reset your computer. You're going to have to do updates. Not every update, works well. And you're going to have to uninstall and reinstall. And guess what? That's part of life.
Yeah.
Right? So at what point do you stop screaming conspiracy and you start to say, show me proof? Now, there's proof that dead people voted in Michigan. And there's proof that Californians voted in Nevada and Arizona. And they double voted, meaning they voted in, they're not residents of that place, but they either voted in California or they just voted in Nevada. But they're not real residents there, right? They use it as a tax shelter.
That's right. The other problem we have with this is we're a couple of dudes talking on, live streaming. When mainstream media, which it's like, yeah, most people don't trust it. It's like, well, really? Because there's still millions of people watching it. And as you pointed out earlier, they refuse to air this. And so a couple of guys live streaming versus mainstream media, people are just not hearing the message, I don't think.
I think people hear the message. I mean, there's a case to be made that millions of people don't watch CNN. CNN's viewership is a few million.
But there's only people like Joe Rogan that gets millions of viewers.
Not true. Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire have millions of people that listen to their podcasts. NPR has a bunch of people that listen to their podcasts. They're a little bit more lefty, right? But alternative media, the Young Turks, Steven Crowder, Steve Bannon, all of these online platforms have a lot more active, engaged viewers. So Steve Bannon today did something that was freaking unbelievable. So Trump invited all the Pennsylvania state senators to come to the White House. And one Republican state senator declined and said, it's the day before Christmas. I'm not doing the 2-hour drive and coming to the White House. There's nothing in that conversation that's going to change anything.
Okay.
So Steve Bannon, to his audience, said, call this guy, call his office, go to his Twitter, and let him know that he should respect the office of the presidency. And when the president of the United States invites you to lunch, you get your butt in the car.
I know.
And you go.
Like, what happened to the word civil servant? Servant.
So, his voicemail was full within 10 minutes. His inbox was swamped, and he took down his Twitter account from the amount of people that were tweeting at him.
No kidding. Just to get to work, for crying out loud.
Right? So when we say that a lot of people watch the mainstream media, the challenge we have with the mainstream media is who watches it. So I'll explain. Most conservative, blue-collar, hard workers will listen to Steve Bannon. They'll watch Fox. They'll watch Tucker Carlson and Hannity on Fox News. They don't watch anything else on Fox, right? They'll probably listen to Steve Bannon. They'll listen to Blaze TV, right? And they'll watch the Daily Wire, and that's where they get their information from.
Okay, how many people do listen to the Daily Wire? I'm surprised to hear
millions.
Millions.
I mean, okay. Millions of people listen to the Daily Wire.
Brilliant.
Okay. Millions of people. So you have that. On the left, the Young Turks, the online, those guys, they also have the more liberal, kind of leftist, more activist crowd. Right? So the uneducated but activist crowd per se. And I'm not labeling all of their audience as uneducated, right? But they probably get the blue collar on the left side of the aisle. Right, okay? Because not all blue collar is conservative. There's some blue collar that's fairly leftist and liberal. But mainstream media attracts in what we consider to be intellectuals.
Okay, yeah.
So their listenership is like these, and the people they bring on their shows are what we consider to be intellectuals.
Right.
So that's why we still justify mainstream media. When I hear Ben Shapiro, or when I hear the Young Turks, or Tim Pool, and they're all talking about the mainstream media, I'm like, how about we have our own news source, folks? How about we don't reference them? Because right now we've made the people who are supposed to give us the news part of the news.
So hang on, explain that for a little bit. But also, yeah, okay, go on, explain that.
So we've made CNN, rather than a news source, a source for news.
News, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so we've reached that point where I'm like, come on, guys. Like, how about we don't talk about CNN and how jacked up they are? How about we treat them for what they are? Propaganda. And we don't give them credit. And then we bring a level of intellectuality to compete with the intellectual free-minding base.
Mm. Yeah.
And let our war of ideas go to battle on the airwaves, and let the best ideas win.
Sure. Yeah. Democracy, my friend.
So I'm on this long rant, but I'm really fired up about this for a bunch of reasons. We're watching a new strain of COVID come through, right? What happened in the UK? UK's under martial law, buddy.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
So tell us a little bit about that. You're an old chap from across the pond. So, chap, what's happening in England?
Shake the accent. It's 30 years in the new world. People think I'm a Brit. I'm really not. I have what I call a healthy disdain for the Windsor family, the royals, who come from a lineage of murderers and rapists and brutal regimes. And the only reason the Windsors are still living in Buck House today is because after Oliver Cromwell decided to let them live, they just became that little useless family that sits there inbreeding. And I'll stop because I can go on about that one.
Your disdain for the royal family is joined with mine. Oh, sorry. Oh,
no worries. That's all right. We're cyber people. We're technologists. So yeah, my understanding of what's going on in the UK right now, we have another strain. Is the strain immune from our current immunization? I don't know the answer to that. But is it going to create 2020 all over again in spite of the vaccine we've got? This is the fear that people have. And yes, I've spoken to friends in the UK, and it's worse than here as far as you're not even allowed to have friends over at Christmas. And your neighbors are encouraged to rat you out. It's real 1984 George Orwell stuff. It's like, wow, really? If you haven't reread George Orwell, I reread 1984 about 5 years ago. So now with the internet and as we know it, reread 1984. It will blow your mind. It's an easy read. You can get through it in a weekend. Then read Animal Farm. Again, you can get through that one in a weekend. And you'll go, oh my goodness, George Orwell was something else. And he really was. And here's what's super fascinating about Orwell. So Orwell, actually, he was stationed in British-occupied Burma in the early 1930s. There's a great story about him, actually. His real name was Eric Arthur Blair. He was stationed at a rural outpost in Burma, and his job there was to maintain the kingdom, right? The big British Empire, which was already crumbling by then, and World War II finished him off. We can talk about that another time. But George Orwell was called one time because a work elephant had escaped its enclosure. Now, this was before even telephones were installed in these outposts. So he grabbed his rifle, he went running down to the area where this elephant had escaped its enclosure. He had obviously knocked over carts, trampled over a few people. It was a very big deal. By the time he had finished tracking it down, he found it grazing peacefully in a field. You can go online and see all this stuff. Eric Arthur Blair, that was his name. And so anyway, by the time he finished tracking it down, about a crowd of 3,000-4,000 onlookers, the villagers, had gathered behind the mighty British soldier who was taking aim at this elephant grazing in the field. And he could see that the elephant no longer posed a threat. Right? It was just grazing. It had done what elephants do when they're trained up, trampled around, and hurt people subsequently. And Orwell wanted to make a decision that, you know what, I'll just let it go. I mean, it's not posing a threat anymore. But the crowd of people behind him were so strong in their energy of, what are you going to do? Flex that British muscle. And so he took aim and he shot the elephant. Now, with guns not being as powerful as they are today, he had to shoot it again and again and again until it left it bleeding in this field, bleeding to death. And it let out this big trumpet sigh. In fact, there is an essay. You have to read it. It's called Shooting the Elephant by George Orwell. It will bring you to tears. After that, and I'm really long-winded way of saying what's going on in England right now. After that, George Orwell was honorably discharged from the military, and he was going to start writing against imperialism, against what the British Empire was doing, occupying all these countries. But then World War II hit, Nazi Germany, then the concentration camps with Jews, and then Russia. So he dedicated his life to what he thought was a much greater threat than the imperialism of England, communism. And that's when he wrote 1984. Then he wrote Animal Farm. Then he wrote in 1984. And if you recall, in 1984, he spoke about boxes that would speak to you. Well, he had no idea of the internet. So today, what George Orwell was referring to as the thought police, because you remember that, they were able to snitch on people, right? And the citizenry were encouraged to betray their fellow members of citizens of the streets. Today, the thought police is big tech, right? It's social media, because they can shut down people's thoughts. They can also expose them. They can also take, and people will do this to us. They'll take a snippet from James or a snippet from me and vilify us, right? This is the thought police today. So today in 2020, Christmas 2020, I have friends that are saying, okay, how are we going to get our kids over for Christmas without the neighbors seeing? All right, this is what we should do. We should give them a garage door opener now, and then we'll get them to drive in with their kids and our grandkids and everything so we can see them, and then shut the garage door really quickly before they all get out of the car. So we'll have to get our car, we'll have to park it on the street down the road so that they can drive into the house and no one will see them. This is what's happening right now. I don't know that they're calling it martial law, but holy schmoly, ladies and gentlemen, that is what's happening in my old Blighty. Hence, I'm over here.
Welcome to the free world. Although you're in one of the evil sevens, as we call them, Jersey. Yeah, there's the evil sevens, right? It's everything on the left coast, so California, Oregon, Washington, and then New York, Jersey, Mass, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there you go, my friend. This is it. I got to report to the New York office, so I'm in Jersey. I actually love the area I'm in, but yeah, it's I don't have many friends. Hence, you are, and we're having a scotch virtually.
Well, cheers to that.
Cheers, buddy. So yeah, that's what's going on in Europe. But you were going to say about
so I'll tell you something about COVID and what I'm watching now. So California, they're shutting down. Fauci's canceling Christmas, and I'm like, F up yours. And I'm Jewish, and I'm like, up yours, Fauci, right? Like, up yours. No offense, you flip-flopped more times than I do when I'm sleeping at night and I'm having a restless CISO night. Right? Like, some people turn over every 10 minutes, when you're sleepless. The guy's flip-flopped on COVID so many times. He first came out and said, no big deal, it's not going to be a thing. What's masks? Well, you don't need masks. It'll be fine. Then he's like, everyone needs to wear a mask.
Before that, there's this COVID thing. We think it's transferring animal to animal. We don't think it's transferring animal to human, which wasn't even true. But that was the very first message from the CDC and Fauci.
Yeah, well, Fauci's not from the CDC, he's from NIH, so you got to remember that. NIH, the most wasteful healthcare. They're the guys who are spending money on. They spent $3 million interviewing San Franciscoans on the use of edible marijuana. So edible cannabis. So I want to share a story that's very agitating me today. So for our audience who don't know, I'm half Israeli. And my wife's from Israel, and her family's in Israel. And I love Israel as a country. I do. But the government of Israel has botched COVID so many times. They've destabilized the country. Now the government has broken up. They're headed for elections in March.
Yeah.
That's their fourth election in 2 years. But I read a story today, and it shook me to my core. And it shook me to my core because it is a violation of civil liberties and human rights at a level that is just unfathomable. So I'll explain. Israel has decided unanimously as a government at once that anyone who comes from abroad into Israel who's an Israeli citizen will be required to spend 2 weeks at a government hotel in quarantine, being tested and monitored, and only after 2 weeks can they be released. So I'm on Facebook, and I read this post by a person who had just come from your old land, from England, flew into Tel Aviv, landed at 4 a.m. They were met at the gate by the military and the police, who took their passports and then loaded them onto buses without telling them where they were going, and took them to a hotel in Jerusalem. So they landed at 4 a.m. They got to the hotel at 6:30 a.m. So mind you, you're tired. You're after a 5-hour flight. It's a red-eye flight, right? So you're exhausted. You're counting the minutes to get home and get into your bed and go to sleep. Maybe make yourself a cup of coffee. But instead, they're taken to a hotel. She states in her post that she didn't even know where they were going. They were loaded onto a bus that was 3/4 full. So there was very little social distancing in the bus.
Right.
Taken to a hotel lobby where they all kind of had to sit and wait in the lobby to get their rooms, which took about an hour because it's a large group. And, when large groups check into hotels, it takes time.
Bloody mind-blowing how they're bungling this thing. I'm going to say something in a sec. Go on, man.
Right. She then goes up to her room around 8 a.m. So she landed at 4. She gets to her room at 8 a.m. And they tell her, she goes, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten in 12 hours. They go, yeah, breakfast will come and be placed outside your door at 8 a.m. She doesn't get breakfast till 9:30, and when she gets breakfast, she gets a piece of stale bread, some butter, and some cheese, I don't know, something.
And hummus.
No hummus.
Oh.
And no coffee in the room. The fridge in the room doesn't work. She can't order in food to the hotel.
Yeah, it's not a good way to treat people, man, I tell you.
And this is your own citizenry.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have a buddy. who's in Philly right now, an Israeli guy who's in Philly. His story was featured in the Jerusalem Post. So they're a family of 4 that live alone, husband, wife, 2 kids. Flew to Philadelphia for a little while. Now they were trying to fly back to Israel, and they were said that they have to go to a mandatory quarantine at a hotel. Well, they go, well, we're a family of 4. What's the big deal? Let us go home, right? Yeah. And we'll do quarantine at home with our kids, so our kids can have their toys, so our kids can be in their home, they have their beds. They won't let them.
Wow.
And I'm just like, what is this tyranny? Yeah. And it's time for people to stop fear government. We have to stop fearing government. We have to remember that the government works for us. We do not work for the government. And what I was telling you earlier, the 10 million people on January 6th, the clashes that are going to happen there between, people are saying there's going to be clashes between the Proud Boys and Antifa. And I'm like, I disagree. I think for once they're going to stand shoulder to shoulder against the swamp. And they're going to be like, screw the Republicans. And they're going to say, screw the Democrats. They don't represent us. We want this whole thing blown up. And the only guy who has the balls to blow it up is Donald Trump, right? And he's going to blow it up.
Yeah, that's right. You know, my daughter is going to university in South Korea, and they do something similar over there, not nearly as militaristic, if that's a word. So she had to have a COVID test 3 days prior to flying out to Seoul. Fair enough. If indeed that's the way you want to run control on COVID by doing global lockdown. My opinion is completely separate, and I'd like to give it again in a second because I think this is such a waste of time. Anyway, COVID test 3 days before you go. Turn up, you produce the COVID test, or they put you on a plane back home. So COVID test, okay, great. Then COVID test when you land. Straight, a government vehicle, straight to the dormitory. At least you go into the dormitory. And then 3 meals a day. Went insane, of course, trapped in this little room for 2 solid weeks in an environment where she doesn't speak any English. Doesn't really get to speak to anybody, actually, but it was difficult for her to ask for things like water and additional food or whatever. So she went through that program. Okay, fine. If that's the way you want to play it. But nobody has been able to explain to me why we wouldn't have just done the following. This is a disease that we have a 99.5% survival rate of survival, except for older people and people who are already infirmed, like they have some kind of compromise to their immune system.
Pre-existing conditions.
So why don't we take care of them? It would be a lot cheaper than spending $2,700 per citizen who only gets $600 in the end. Why don't we take care of those people, specifically those people at risk? They quarantine for this whole year like everybody else did. Too bad, so sad. It's a difficult thing. It's a pandemic. It hurts. I get it. But those people go and get quarantined. Everybody else, get on with your life. Now, 0.5% of those people will die. That's bad. That is called a pandemic. It's a once every century pandemic. It's horrible. But as I think I mentioned on our last show, there have been more additional suicides in Japan this year that have resulted in more deaths than all of the globe's COVID deaths. So we are clearly killing more people, not just bankrupting, not just people who don't have jobs, killing more people from the lockdown. But then we are also, when you explain this thing to me that's happening in Israel, like, how much money does that cost? Right, so the payment of this thing will go on for a century. I cannot understand why we wouldn't have quarantined those at high risk, provided support for them financially, food, taken care of them, and everybody else just gotten on with their day. Moreover, what we would have achieved by now is herd immunity, whereas we're now dealing with a second version of the virus. We would have achieved herd immunity doing that way within months across the planet, 6 months, something like that. I would imagine. Please, a scientist, prove me wrong. And I'm not talking to the best scientists in the world, but everybody I'm talking to has zero evidence that wouldn't be the best program. And yet, most people don't agree with me. They're just going out to lunch, but they got no facts to show me that, okay, that in fact wouldn't work. Tell me why that wouldn't work.
So I live in Georgia. We're open. Everything is open. I, yesterday, met with a very good friend of mine. Shout out to Johnny McCoy. We sat in a restaurant. We had a cup of coffee. He had a Coke. We stood there for 2 hours. We talked. We hugged. We dabbed.
And are people wearing masks in Georgia all over the place?
Not in the restaurant. If you're indoors, you wear a mask. We were sitting on a balcony of a restaurant that had 3 glass panels, 1 open panel. At the open panel, they had a heater, right? Because it's unreasonably cold in Georgia right now, right? It's like 30 degrees. So we've been playing between... tomorrow morning, we're going to wake up to 27 degrees here. Yeah. So for people who don't know what that is, that's like 5 below.
Right.
Okay? We might get snow on Friday.
Right. So, and that's the other, you bring up a brilliant point. I watched a podcast today, Professor Roger Schult, MD, talking about vitamin D, and COVID. Now, here's the irony of doing a lockdown and forcing people in their homes.
They don't get vitamin D.
Yeah, you're doing exactly the opposite. Where's all the talk about get out in the sunshine, get some vitamin D, supplement? You could have done that with that stimulus money instead of handing it over to, I don't know.
And killing businesses.
Yeah, exactly. Walking lizards on a treadmill. Right? Exercise. I mean, you need to do all these things. Forget the masks. Forget everything. Forget absolutely everything. Get fit. Stay healthy. Quarantine the people at risk. That's it. It would be done by now.
So I wanna kind of point something out to you, which is absolutely true. What happened to personal accountability? Personal responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Why is it that...
before I spoke to you, before we came here, I've been working all day. I've been up here on my workstation behind me from 8 o'clock this morning working. I did my podcast this morning. Right, I recorded my podcast. I posted it. I did a bunch of business calls. I've been working. 4:30, 4:45, I was like, listen, I need to get out of my basement because I'm going to be here for 12, 13 hours today. That's not healthy. I need some sun. I need to go out, breathe some fresh air. But I also want to make some chili for Christmas, right? Because I know everything's going to be shut down. You know, I'm like, I'll make some chili. I love me a good old bowl of chili, especially if it's going to be this cold over the next few days. Nothing like a crock pot with chili that you keep on low heat. And you just pour yourself a bowl every few hours.
No, I'm already feeling Christmassy, buddy. It's fantastic. Yeah.
So I went to get all of my chili ingredients. And, you know, I didn't wear a mask when I was walking in the parking lot to go to Publix. I did put on my mask right before I entered the door. I got a really cool grunt style face mask that's kind of like a neck mask.
Yeah, now. And actually, I should iterate, because we've all decided that we'll do this bloody mask thing, I am doing it. Right? I want people to think I'm right.
No, I am too. But but here's the deal. Me wearing a mask doesn't protect me. It doesn't protect others. It protects me. So there's science around mask wearing. In Sweden, they don't wear masks. They social distance. They wear masks only in indoor close quarters.
But my point is, we should have all gone out and got the disease.
Well, so it's really easy right now to look at March and say, this is all the things we should have done. That's like watching a football game, right? And going like, why didn't he just kick the ball?
Yeah, except there's been a bunch of people like me that have been saying it since March. But yeah, I hear you, man.
Right, but there was no science. So what they were saying wasn't based on any physical... It's like Dominion, right? We go back to Dominion. People can say things, and they can be like, well, based on the mutation of the disease, we think. Here's the deal. It's we think. And the we think isn't we know. So when you say we know, you're sure. When you say I think... You're thinking it, but you're not sure of it. I hate to sound like a Seinfeld episode, but that's exactly what that is, right? So we have to look at this from a perspective of, what do I look at and what do I know? So now we know all these things, but back then we didn't. But we knew that in May. We knew that lockdowns didn't work in June and July because guess what? We were told 15 days to slow the spread. We went 15 days. People came out. Spread went down. Then spread went right back up.
Right. And we also knew by May that it was a 99.5% survival rate. Because back in the early days, like the end of January, February, they were saying it's a 4% mortality. That's pretty damn high, actually, right? So I remember doing a calculation and thinking, oh my God, that'll be a big deal. But again, it's like, how did they know that then? They come up with a number. How do they know that? Today, we know what the actual number is. But, you know, so it's guesswork at the beginning, and you got to be okay with scientists going, okay, it's guesswork right at the very beginning. But now we know better. Let's just change the rules. Let's change this lockdown nonsense.
So you see that some states in America have done that: Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota. They're all open. Wyoming, Nebraska,
they're all fully open.
Kansas, Missouri, they're open.
Yeah, but
Ohio.
Okay.
Right? So like big companies may have rules of their own because of their own liability, because when you're big and you're successful and you've got thousands of employees, if something happens to one of them and he gets COVID and he dies, it's a liability. You don't want to do that, right? But you can go sit in a restaurant.
But the problem is it's a mixed match, so we're not going to get herd immunity when only some are doing it, but others are being forced to stay in their homes.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. Well, the idea was you and I, Eddie, we're healthy. So we can go out. If we get it, no big deal. We'll be home for a few weeks. We'll be fine. We develop the antibodies and we're fine.
Right.
The idea was to slow the spread to protect the people who are most vulnerable to it. But now we have a vaccine. So let's vaccinate those people and let everyone else live life.
Yeah. Yeah. Or quarantine those people, as I've been saying, and let everybody else live life. Either way, we should have everybody else live life right now. Yeah.
Well, we live in a very, very interesting time. And we live in a very, very, very diabolical time where governments elected by people are jailing people, taking away their ability to make money. I mean, look, this recall of Gavin Newsom in California is getting serious. They've got like 900,000 signatures. They need to get to 1.5 million certified signatures, which means they need about 2 million signatures, right? Because they're going to get a bunch of signatures thrown out to force a special election.
Wow. Cool. Good. I love shakeups, man. Shakeups are good.
But we're bound for that. My prediction is we're bound for that. We're bound for a shakeup. I feel like 2020 was the year where people said, we're done.
Yeah.
We gave you the satisfaction of the doubt. When you said this is deadly, we all said, fine, we'll all go home, we'll lock our doors, we'll shut down our businesses, we'll bite the bullet, we'll dip into our savings, we'll do all the things we need to do for our community, for the collective good.
That's right. And now we feel betrayed.
We don't only feel betrayed, we feel sold out. Because look at Barstools, man. I don't know, people watching or listening or whatever. Guys, listen. Barstool Sports did a fund to support businesses, to support restaurants that Como and de Blasio shut down. And all those restaurants now, like over like 15,000 restaurants in New York have signed a petition that was like, we'll never serve Como or de Blasio in our restaurants. Like, they're not welcome. Or anyone in their staff is not welcome at our restaurants.
That'd be so much fun. I love disruption.
Right? So, like, I'm dying for de Blasio, right? Call me de Blasio or dipshit Como to go to one of these restaurants and get kicked out. Like, get the fuck out of here. Get out of here, you.
It would cost those guys their livelihoods. Why would you bloody serve the devil? It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Meanwhile, just so for the sake of everyone who's watching who's American, our congressmen and senators were fully paid this entire year. Not even a percentage of their salary was cut in support of the American people. Nancy Pelosi still has a $24,000 what's it called? Fridge or freezer with $15 ice cream in her freezer. Talking about how she's part of the people. These people need to be voted out. Mitch McConnell needs to go. Nancy Pelosi needs to go. Schumer needs to go. Yeah. Anyone who's been in Congress, Bernie Sanders needs to go.
please. I mean, the career politicians, absolutely.
These guys need to go. They need to go. And we as the people need to do everything possible to get them to go. We should ask for their resignations. We should go. I'm supporting an initiative where we no longer, as a state, we no longer follow federal laws until the federal government is held accountable to what they've done to the American population this year.
Yeah.
And we want a resignation of all these leaders who held the American people hostage for the sake of political gain, thinking they were going to get something, and they got nothing out of it.
That's right. There's a bloke called, is it Brandon Stracker? Who's
that? Yeah. I was at his events in Georgia. Walk Away. Yeah, the Walk Away campaign.
Right. Walk Away. Yeah.
Right. So I like Brandon. I've met him several times. I'm actually attending one of his events next week. That's down the street from my house.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I've got Georgia to deal with all that guy. That's right. Now, what's his story? He was formerly a liberal guy, and he got betrayed.
So Walk Away is kind of like the Democratic Party used to be for the worker, and now they're for the elites, and the Republican Party under Trump has kind of taken that. That's true. I have a problem with both parties. I have a problem with the rhinos, which are the old traditional establishment Republicans like Mitch McConnell and the Swamp, right?
Yeah.
I've got a problem with the Democratic Party. I absolutely do.
Yeah.
Right? I like the Walk Away campaign, don't get me wrong, and Brandon's doing fantastic work.
Yeah.
But, and here's the but, it's not enough to go Republican. I will vote for anyone who will represent the people first.
Right.
I don't care what party you go to. I voted yesterday. I had 4 horrible options to vote for.
I know.
I had a swamp senator in David Perdue. I had a new incoming senator in Kelly Loeffler, who I've met her several times. I've attended several of her campaign functions. I know her husband. I think she brings a fresh breath of air to the Senate. Her voting record in the time she was in the Senate was pretty consistent with my values. So I like her. And I'm proud to say I voted for Kelly Loeffler. I had John Ossoff, who I've met more than a dozen times, and he's a geriatric socialist trust fund baby who's done nothing in his life. Hasn't created a job. He hasn't done anything. He's got a very, very wealthy family with a successful father who was publishing books for many, many years, who's made a lot of money from the publication industry. And he makes documentary movies from grant money that he gets from random organizations. And then you've got the Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's a Marxist, hates this country, and is an anti-Semite. Those were my options in heading to the booth. And America deserves better. I deserve better. But I voted based on my values. And I voted on based who I think I can influence to follow my values.
Yeah.
Because there's no way I'd vote for Warnock, and there was no way I was going to vote for Ossoff. And that's a sad part, because I didn't want to vote for Perdue either. Loeffler was the only person I was going to give a vote for, and that's simply because she hasn't been in Senate long enough to have a track record, but I was willing to give her a chance because her initial track record seemed halfway decent.
Yeah. I suspect money is the reason these people are on that card. And here's where my mind is going right now. How do we fix this? It's a beast that you have to wrestle to the ground. So tremendously difficult.
January 6th is where you fix this.
Yeah, and your screen just went blank, by the way.
I know. I got it.
Yeah,
January 6th is where you fix this.
actually, that would be interesting. A kind of small revolution in a sense. That would be one thing. I was going to say, we've got to get rid of the super PACs. We've got to get rid of the special interests. It's tough because there is a good argument for special interest groups. We're an hour and 10 minutes in, so I don't want to open up this part of the dialogue. But I would wrestle with how to control special interest groups so that you can have people who are young, dynamic, not bought off, not owned by some special interest, and genuinely have the civil servant heart and mindset to be running these things. Because I do not understand how these people get onto the ballot for you to have such a horrific choice, and I suspect it's purely because they pay their way there. And that
well, they don't pay their way there. They raise their money the way there. They,
that's what I mean, right?
Yeah, they do some stuff on the way. It's very agitating, and we deserve better. And if we've learned anything, is the slap that we got in the face with this bill, with this bailout, $900 billion, of which 180 billion go to the under that. I think it's like what's 600 times 100 and 200 million.
Give it to me. 600 times 200 million.
Yeah.
200 million, so that's 2 million, so that's 20 million, so that's 200 million. Is 1.E11, hold on, is 120, and I'll give you the zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so that's 120 billion, right? 9 zeros? That's be 120 billion.
So $120 billion of 900 billion go to the people who fund this. And the rest goes to a bunch of bullshit stuff, like $40 million to the Kennedy Center, which has been closed since COVID started.
Yeah, the Smithsonian gets millions and millions of dollars. That's right. Yeah.
No, we're going to need to do some changes. If anything, I think I find myself that now I have more in common with my displeasure with the government, with the left, than I do with the center. Because I find everyone in the center is kind of like, that's Washington. And I'm like, no, that can't be what we accept. We deserve better.
Now, in previous stimulus-type packages and spending by Congress, is it true that the main reason we are really digging in and understanding the details about lizards on treadmill because we were looking for the $600 stimulus checks? I mean, has it been that these things have typically slipped under the rug previously?
Yeah, so the way they do these bills is technically always is they send it to the congressman at 6, 7 p.m., right? So prime time, so no one has an ability to go to the news and talk about it, right? They vote on it by midnight, and by the time you wake up, the narrative's already been spun by the media. Right. Everyone's getting money.
And is this the first time we've really exposed that?
I think we didn't expose it. What drove people to look at this was the speech that President Trump gave yesterday.
Right, on vetoing it.
Right.
That speech, yeah. And
that's what woke people up, and people were like, well, why is he vetoing this bill? He said he would sign it. And then people and he brought up some of the stuff that was in the bill in his speech. And he said, stop wasting money, right, and do more for the American people.
So I follow somebody on Twitter called Marina Medvin, at Marina Medvin on Twitter, and she highlighted a couple of points from the speech. So let's close with this. It's quite interesting. And I want to put it to you, my friend, because you're the one that introduced me to Section 230 for how to deal with the social media companies on their basically manipulating the dialogue for American people and not there being an open town hall, which is what we're trying to do here, right? So Marina said, she highlighted this from Trump's speech, addressing Congress. Your failure to terminate the very dangerous national security risk of Section 230 will make our intelligence virtually impossible to conduct without everyone knowing what we are doing at every step. I think he's dead right on that one. That's a good one. A little bit more detail, and then he says, Section 230 facilitates the spread of foreign disinformation online, which is a serious threat to our national security and our election integrity. Additionally, the act includes language that would require the renaming of certain military installations. Over the course of the United States history, these locations have taken on significance to the American story and those who have helped write it, and that far transcends their namesake. My administration respects the legacy of the millions of American servicemen and servicewomen who have served with honor at these military bases and who from these locations have fought, bled, and died for their country. Listen to this. From their facilities, from these facilities, we have won 2 world wars. I have been clear in my opposition to politically motivated attempts like this to wash away history and to dishonor the immense progress our country has fought for in realizing our founding principles. I could go on. It's very good. You can look this up. Yeah, I'll stop right there. You can look that up, ladies and gentlemen. This is, James, when are we going to be back? Because it's coming up for Christmas. So let's break out our calendars, my friend, and tell the audience.
So, folks, we'll be back the Wednesday in January. So next week we'll be off for the new year. Wednesday the 6th at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be multi-streaming the show going forward, folks. So it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on LinkedIn, and it'll be on Periscope. So you can watch us in all 3 places. We may stream it in more places as well. We're not sure yet, but for sure you'll catch us in those 3 spots. So we'll be on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Periscope. Join us, debate. We'll have a different structure going forward in January. We'll have an intro song and an outro. We'll have a bunch of really cool stuff that we're going to be bringing on to the show. We're leveling up our game.
We're going to debate each other, debate other people.
Yes, sir. We're going to be bringing on guests, different experts. And so I'm very excited. I may have a surprise guest, one of the orchestrators of the Middle East Peace, maybe joining us early in January to talk a little bit about orchestrating peace in a town hall format. That'll be a lot of fun. So with that being said, folks,